everybody. I hope everybody can hear me okay. I did run into some last moment technical difficulties that will prevent me from turning my webcam on and seeing everybody here. But regardless, I appreciate the opportunity to give a brief update here titled GEO and CEOS Flood Community Developments. So my intent here is to give a rather broad and hopefully comprehensive overview and snapshot of the various flood efforts that are ongoing and have occurred and began over the course of the last year within both the GEO and CEOS global communities. So very quickly, again, obviously my name is David Borges. I'm a physical scientist with the NASA Applied Sciences Disasters Program, and I am currently serving as co-chair of the Group on Earth Observations Disaster Risk Reduction Working Group, as well as secretariat of the Committee on Earth Observation Satellites Working Group Disasters. Next slide, please. So what is GEO? GEO is the Group on Earth Observations. It is an international partnership of more than 100 national governments and I think quite a few more than 100 participating organizations, of which Global Flood Partnership is one of those GEO participating organizations. And we collectively are working towards a future where decisions and actions broadly for the benefit of humankind are informed by sustained, comprehensive and coordinated Earth observations. GEO has three primary engagement priorities. Those include the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the United Nations Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, and the Paris Climate Accord. Next slide, please. So obviously, for the purposes of this presentation and for our new GEO Disaster Risk Reduction Working Group, we align primarily, although not exclusively, with the engagement priority related to the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction 2015 to 2030. I see that in the previous presentation, I think we pulled similar graphics from a recent Human Cost of Disasters report published by UNDRR. So I don't really, I think, need to go into the relevance of our efforts surrounding flood here, but just highlighting that both our CEOS and GEO communities do align broadly with the Sendai framework here and the global targets outlined in the graphic to the left. Next slide, please. The GEO 2020 to 2022 work program is quite large and comprehensive. It's made up of more than 60 individual efforts that do vary in levels of maturity, as well as being thematically as well as geographically oriented. So quite a few of these are related to disaster risk reduction, but very often do operate independently, and as well as independently thematically, as well as independently geographically. Down there at the bottom, it's likely hard to see, but there are 4 primary regional GEOs, to include the Afra-GEO, Ameri-GEO, Asia-Oceania GEO, and the Euro-GEO. Next slide, please. So GEO Leadership, which includes the GEO Secretariat as well as the GEO Program Board, made the decision around this time last year, I believe, to stand up several new thematic working groups, one of which, of course, is the relatively new GEO DRR working group. The primary purpose and intent of our new working group is to develop and implement a coherent and cross-cutting approach within GEO and across that entire work program that I just shared, to advance the use of EO in support specifically of countries' national disaster risk reduction and resilience efforts. It does also now serve as the primary GEO liaison to UNDRR itself, and promotes dissemination and use of Earth observations to strengthen capabilities to reduce disaster risk. informed and according to individual country needs as identified by UNDRR. And it will also address and try to strengthen the linkages between DRR, climate change, these sustainable development goals, and relevant urban activities. And finally, I just want to point out the relevance here of working with other partners, not exclusively United Nations, but in this case, the United Nations Global Geospatial Information Management Working Group on Disasters does have a very relevant and complementary strategic framework on geospatial information that is complementary to the Sendai framework itself. Next slide, please. Governance here, you can see, is, I think, quite broad in terms of having representation and leadership from all across the world. It is organized into 3 subgroups, the first of which I serve as co-chair and lead coordination broadly across the work program. Subgroup 2 leads efforts with UNDRR coordination in terms of Sendai framework and things such as the Global Assessment Report, or GAR, that is released on a 2-year rolling basis. And finally, subgroup 3, led by my colleague Kine from DEAR Africa and Nigeria, focusing on those linkages between climate change, SDGs, and urban activities. Next slide, please. So while these working groups are relatively new and have just been spun up really over this past summer, and are just now getting kind of our feet underneath us, as it were, I want to highlight the 4 primary flood-related activities included in our GEO work program at this time. It's not to say that other activities do not also address flood in some aspects. I'm sure that is very likely the case, but these are the 4 primary activities that really explicitly state flood-related objectives. So those are the Global Water Sustainability Initiative, or GEO-GLOS. GEO-GLOS is a collaborative effort and user-driven initiative that brings together water and Earth observation activities around the world to guide decision-making processes, and it provides coordination, knowledge, data, and products among diverse freshwater activities within and outside of GEO. The second here is DIAS, or the Data Analysis and Integration System. And I apologize, GEO-GLOS is led jointly by the French space agency CNES as well as NOAA. DIAS is led by the Remote Sensing Technology Center of Japan, or RESTEC. And DIAS is an advanced GEO-compliant e-infrastructure component that addresses challenges associated with the large increase in EO data volumes by developing a core system for data integration and analysis. Thirdly, here we have the Global Flood Awareness System, or GLOFAS. I suspect that I probably don't need to go into much further detail, as our GFP community here is likely extremely familiar with GLOFAS. But as Peter has already highlighted, GLOFAS is part of the Copernicus Emergency Management Service, which became fully operational in 2018 and has had a series of significant updates and releases since that time, of which he just spoke to previously. And finally, we have the Global Flood Risk Monitoring Community activity, which is led by NASA and the NASA Disasters Program Manager, Dr. David Green, as well as myself. And the GFRM community activity supports and integrates efforts that leverage Earth observations to improve the ability to assess flood risk on a global scale and translate this risk information to impacts at the community, national, and regional level. UNDRR defines risk as the combination and interaction of 3 specific elements, those being hazards, vulnerability, and exposure. So in this context, our community activity seeks to advocate the importance of Earth observations to flood risk reduction through strategic engagement with stakeholder communities that can provide open data and methodologies that integrate these 3 data streams. So the next several slides here are going to run through just some of the Oh, I apologize. I should have said next slide, Albert. Sorry about that. This is an overview slide of our GFRM community with some of the content, and you can see some of our community members included there in the logos below. And I'm just going to run through some very high-level overviews of some of our projects and participants in our community. Next slide, please. So this first one here, Global Rapid Flood Mapping System with Spaceborne SAR data, is led by Sang-Ho Yoon of the NASA JPL Advanced Rapid Imaging and Analysis Collaboration, or Arya. And this project aims to streamline a SAR-based end-to-end automated flood response process by providing flood extent mapping in the form of flood proxy maps, or FPMs, as I imagine many within our Global Flood Partnership have likely seen some of these products. And the proposed project outcome is an optimal SAR framework for future near real-time flood responses that helps to improve modeling methods and flood risk analysis. Next slide, please. This project, integrating global remote sensing and modeling systems for local flood prediction and impact assessment, is led by Bob Brackenridge of Dartmouth Flood Observatory. This project's efforts are directed towards producing state-of-the-art, globally scoped flood prediction monitoring capabilities and risk evaluations by automating data dissemination wherever possible and directly addressing the needed connections to multiple end users in order to provide them with useful information. And I do believe we are going to hear later in this meeting from World Food Program, and Bob and his team work quite closely with the World Food Program OPCEN, or Operations Center GIS team in Rome, and work to provide value-added flood products to them in addition to quite a few other end user partners. Next slide, please. Here we have a global flash flood risk project led by Andrew Kruszewicz of Columbia University Earth Institute. This project is working towards enhancing analyst and decision maker capacity to better prepare, respond, and recover from flash floods in particular. So there's some information here obviously included on the slide, but forecast-based financing mechanisms for flash floods in various target countries is of particular interest to this project. And recently the team has been working quite closely with several partners in Ecuador and really understanding the value of developing trusted relationships is another primary focus of this project, and producing flash flood susceptibility data at individual basin levels and integrating these data with a variety of vulnerability and exposure data to benefit those in-country partners is a really exciting outcome of this project at this time. Next slide, please. Finally, our last project that I wanted to highlight within our global flood risk monitoring community activity is advancing access to global flood modeling and alerts using the Pacific Disaster Center Disaster Aware platform and relevant remote sensing technologies. This project is led by Maggie Glasgow, also of NASA JPL. Her team is working directly with PDC to leverage their existing disaster aware platform, which incidentally has over 7,000 users globally and a disaster alert app with more than 1.4 million downloads. The system of systems approach combines model outputs from both GFMS as well as GLOFASS with data on watershed risk, which is then validated using SAR data for inundation and depth where possible and available. And the model of models is used to forecast flood severity at the global scale by integrating these two models into near real-time inundation outputs derived from EO data sets in the model of models. So those were the primary projects that I wanted to highlight for GFRM, and I think questions will be addressed later on during this meeting, but I will take a moment here to invite anyone attending this meeting who does have interest in joining our GEO GFRM community to reach out to me or the others mentioned in these overview slides. Within the context of GEO, community activities are structured quite intentionally to be somewhat organic, and we would welcome anyone who wishes to join and contribute towards some of these goals and objectives that I've outlined here. Next slide, please. So shifting a little bit here, the Committee on Earth Observation Satellites, or CEOS, is also a GEO participating organization and is, I think it's safe to say, recognized as the space-based Earth observation authority within GEO globally. So CEOS is a mechanism to coordinate civil space-based EO programs globally and promote data exchange for society's benefit. And currently we do have more than 35 national space agency members since Poland's space agency Polsa just joined our community just weeks ago, actually, as well as 25 additional associate members. Next slide, please. CEOS contains a variety of different thematically focused working groups, one of which is the WG disasters. And our working group ensures the sustained coordination of disaster-related activities undertaken by all CEOS agencies and acts as that interface between CEOS and the broad community of stakeholders and users involved in DRM and DRR. Membership to the working group is open to all CEOS members and associates, and in some cases, the working group does include experts from non-CEOS agencies where relevant experience is beneficial to contribute to the objectives of our working group. Next slide, please. So it's more or less, I suppose, been in formulation for some time now, but was just endorsed at the annual CEOS plenary just weeks ago, actually. Our GEOLEOSAR flood pilot is in its beginning stages. It is co-led by NASA and NOAA, as well as with the excellent leadership and support of Mr. Guy Schumann of RSS Solutions. And our pilot here seeks to explore and demonstrate good practices in the context of our CEOS National Space Agency members towards integrating the growing constellation of optical low Earth orbit, synthetic aperture radar, and geosynchronous satellite data sources, as well as relevant methodologies for flood mapping efforts at regional and local scales. So we will be achieving these deliverables and objectives by focusing on 6 regional case studies, most of which include specific transboundary basins. And these subgroups are being led by working group disaster members from the Argentinian Space Agency CONAI, the Indian Space Agency ISRO, as well as LIST, the Chinese Academy of Sciences, the Canadian Space Agency, the Natural Resources Canada Agency, as well as NASA, NOAA, and Harikopia University, Athens. So we'll also be leveraging several other developing efforts across the CEOS community more broadly to include CEOS analysis ready data. I don't think I have the time to really delve into that in great detail, but please do reach out, or you can very likely Google. CEOS is, in my humble opinion, making quite some significant strides towards really defining authoritatively both the definition of what is analysis ready data, as well as defining specific product family specifications with associated metadata standards for both optical and SAR data. And it really is some exciting work. And the second effort broadly across CEOS is leveraging the general cloud migration efforts that I think we all see and are aware of, but in the context of our national space agencies and the different strategies towards that objective, and how we can improve collectively the efforts related to flood mapping within the CEOS community. Next slide, please. So my final topic that I just wanted to highlight quickly is Seahawks Coast, which stands for Coastal Observations, Applications, Services, and Tools. This is also a brand new ad hoc team within CEOS. And it will be addressing the thematic and very unique coastal environment globally, addressing monitoring, assessing, and ultimately forecasting the coastal hazards that occur where the sea meets the land. And these physical processes include episodic, temporary coastal flooding events that are typically storm driven, as well as sustained submergence issues in the form of coastal inundation associated most commonly with mean sea level rise, as well as subsidence factors. Next slide, please. And this is the latest attempt to kind of graphically define the CEOS Coast efforts. And you can see here that it will be addressing a variety of cross-cutting needs as well as products needed, and is really divided into two primary parts. The first one being land to sea impacts, which are addressing primarily biological and ecological factors, and secondly, the sea to land impacts in terms of physical forcing, coastal disasters and natural hazards, and associated flooding and inundation, which is the, I think, relevant aspect of this effort that I wanted to bring up. Next slide, please. Yep, so this is my contact information. So I welcome questions after the other presenters have finished, and I look forward to a lively panel discussion. But please reach out with any follow-up or any questions. And that's all I have today. Thank you, Albert.
Thanks, David.